And now I can remember when I'm standing at that fork in the road, I'm going to go either this way, which is fear, or I'm going to go this way, which is courage. And you know what is so hard about that decision? I think neither one of those decisions are free. There's a cost. I think of it like this. Okay, here I'm at the fork in the road. I'm going to go here to fear, or I'm going to here to courage. And then I'm like, you know what? Choose your hard. Choose your hard. You think one of those is easier than another?
Welcome to the Jamodi Podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is Jamodi, just a matter of doing it.
Today we are joined by the founder of Winning Matters, Shawnee Harle. Coach Harle helps people shift from good to great and become the best version of themselves. She teaches them how to win from within, so they show up with courage and confidence on the biggest day, the biggest stage of their life. Coach Harle draws from 30 plus years of coaching experience. She was the head women's basketball coach at the University of Calgary for 20 years. Coach Harle was the Canada West Coach of the Year in 96, 2000, and 2008. She's also a two-time Olympian as an assistant coach for the Canadian women's national basketball team for 8 years. To learn more about her training, to watch her videos and listen to different materials, check out ShawneeHarle.com. Before we hear from Coach, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at Jamodi Podcast.
Yes.
There you are.
Boom.
What's up, Coach?
Nice to meet you, Matt. I'm Shawnee.
It's nice to meet you, and I am just so honored, excited to have this time with you. Thank you so much for coming on.
I love this stuff. I can talk all day.
Well, you and I don't have much of a connection. I believe it's Tyler Costin, correct? That hooked us up.
Yes.
How do you know Tyler?
Oh boy. So Tyler and I go way back. I'm going to say 15 years-ish. I was a head collegiate coach in Canada. And I worked at PGC.
Oh, nice.
And then I hired Tyler and Chad to come and work specifically with my collegiate team. And so I've just had that interaction with them over the years. And then, we've just stayed connected. I'm just a really big believer in what he does. And then he said, "Hey, Shawnee, I got this guy you should connect with." I'm like, "Good, let's go."
Let's go. I love both those guys. Spent quite a few years with them with PGC myself. And so I got to ask you, what was it like taking those two and all the concepts to your college team? How did they receive it?
It was 12 out of 10. It was just fantastic. I mean, I'm thinking that you know how PGC does.
Yeah,
things.
I directed for 5 years. So I during the summer. So I love, and I was an athlete with Dick back in the day. I love it.
It was, I just don't see how it couldn't be anything but well received, because what they do is they bring in a system and they bring in a dictionary, and it's a new language that everybody knows how to speak. It was fabulous. I felt it was a game changer, and I continue to use the concepts I was there for 18 years, and I continue to use their concepts every single season.
So you transition from coaching to Winning Matters, where you get to work with some mental toughness training with coaches and athletes. How did that transition go?
Well, it's funny, the journey that life presents for us, and different paths open up. And I finished collegiate coaching in 2012. And because I'd been doing it for about 30 years. And so I finished in 2012, and I kept coaching, but not collegiately. I started working with as an assistant coach with our Olympic team.
Yeah.
So then I did that through to 2017. And then again, I was like, man, oh man, I feel like I'm ready for something else. And we had a humongous, terrible disappointment in 2016 at the Rio Olympics. And we underperformed, choked, whatever words that, we would use. And I really paid attention to that. And I paid attention to how it affected me. And I really went into a dark place when I got back from the Olympics in 2016. And when I emerged, I asked myself 2 questions. What didn't I see? And then the one that really struck me was, what did I see but refused to acknowledge? And so that led me down this path of I'm like, you know what? There has to be a way for athletes to show up as their greatest self on the biggest day, the biggest stage of their life. But then how come so few do? Yeah. Why does our scared self show up? Because that's what happened to us in the Olympics. Our scared self showed up. Now, I didn't have these words back then. I didn't know how to speak to it. But after that disappointment, I'm like, you know what? I am going to find some answers for athletes. And that was the start of this journey. And of course, it gave me this lens, I was an athlete first, then a coach after that. And so I remembered as an athlete all the struggles that I had. Then as a coach, I got to see the struggles and how ill-equipped I was to help. And I'm like, okay. And so I started my own mental toughness business, and here I am.
And now you made it to the Jamodi podcast. But that is awesome. What a cool story. I was writing down those 2 questions because I think you're right on the money. As a coach, those are 2 questions that you have to ask yourselves after a season. I'm thinking of my last year's team. We had a great senior group. Loved them individually, loved them as a senior class, and the team was so much fun to coach. They were very PGC with all their habits and everything, and we did have some injuries happen throughout the year that derailed maybe our rhythm and chemistry from time to time. And when guys came back, it took them a little bit to get going, but we underperformed, as a group. And it was one of those teams where I think myself and those guys early on in the year, we had some success and we started to all think like, this is it. I think we all were drinking that Kool-Aid, even though we try to be process-based and we're focused on today, 1% better. It was hard not to think like, man, we're beating some teams that we really never have before, and it feels good and it looks right. But the question of what didn't I see? I did kind of ask myself that. And then when you find those answers, it leads you to, why, if I did notice that even at the time, why didn't I acknowledge it? What was holding me back from doing that? So I appreciate you sharing those 2 questions alone, Coach, have made this already a really good talk.
You know what? I think that second question is so important. Important and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And usually uncomfortable is important because it forces us to look inside and look in the mirror. And that's something that is uncomfortable. And many of us don't want to do it, because when I said, what did I see but refuse to acknowledge, I have to take responsibility.
Yeah.
I have to be accountable for why didn't I acknowledge it? And, one of the things that I'm learning through this mental toughness journey for all of us, not just coaches, athletes, parents, us, just how we show up in our lives, is when we don't want to acknowledge something, right? It's a defense mechanism. It's an avoidance behavior. And it's good to go inside and say, why did I avoid that? And another way of saying it for me is I call these fear-based behaviors.
Yeah.
That somehow fear holds us back from taking action, fear of, and when we fill in the blanks, we might not like the answer, but I think it it helps us emerge as the greatest version of ourselves. That we first have to go inside. We have to take a walk inside and do hard work. And sometimes it's not very fun.
No, easier just to turn the page and say, next season, this will be better. This will be different. But I think as we want our players to be growing year to year, we want to continue to grow and try to get that 1% better. I was trying to think of my situation and what I did see but refused. And what the reason is, I think I lack courage. And you talked about fear, but I think I lack courage to have those difficult conversations with some of those seniors. I think I shielded them at times when, if they hadn't played for me for 3 years, hadn't had so much skin in the game, or, and I felt like giving me so much, their lack of maybe effort at times, consistency at times. I don't think I would have in the past allowed that to slide as long. And I even had, this is looking back and having an assistant coach saying, like, I think we need to change some things up. Well, that would have required me really taking guys that had done a lot for me and changing up their role. And honestly, coach, I don't think I had the courage to do that. And now when you don't have the courage and that fear takes over, then you're left with regret, which is one of the worst feelings that we don't want our players to have that. We don't want our children to have that. And I have a little bit of that. You didn't know this was going to be a therapy session, did you?
Well, most of my sessions are therapy sessions. Like, seriously,
yeah.
I just think it's so important to talk about this.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about the weather. I don't want to talk about X's and O's. Well, I do. I love X's and O's.
Yeah.
But to me, this is the juicy stuff. I think these are the difference makers. And first of all, for you to say that you lacked courage, I think it's courageous to say that. And I believe that one of the most important qualities of a leader is courage. And I also believe that courage is a choice, and decisions decide destiny. And when we know we saw this and we didn't address it, that was a choice. And we have to live with that choice. In your case, in my case, it's happened to me so often in my career.
Yeah.
And now I can remember when I'm standing at that fork in the road, I'm going to go either this way, which is fear, or I'm going to go this way, which is courage. And you know what is so hard about that decision? I think neither one of those decisions are free. There's a cost. I think of it like this. Okay, here I'm at the crossroads, fork in the road. I'm going to go here to fear, or I'm going to here to courage. And then I'm like, you know what? Choose your hard. Choose your hard. You think one of those is easier than another? I can hide. I can avoid. That's not an easy choice, because now I have to pretend and fake it that everything's kind of okay, even though I know it isn't. Or I can be like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm just going to I'm going to put my courage pants on. You don't get to do that for free. You're going to go talk to some of your veteran players that have been with you for 3 years, and you're going to change their role. That isn't free. So it's this ability, isn't it, to say, you know what, this is why I'm a leader. I have to be able to choose my hard. I'm going to choose this courageous hard over this fear hard, because that's what my greatest self would do.
Coach, I feel like it's already been pretty transformational for me in just those 10 minutes. And I love the idea of choose your hard. I have a little board here that from all these talks I get, I just write down some of the big points that I feel like I need to remind myself of. And choose your hard is going to be up there after this, because I think that's really impactful. But all the experience that you've had in different teams and with PGC, obviously culture is a big deal, and it's a buzzword that people like to throw around, but it's real. In your opinion, how does it drive performance?
Oh, I feel like the topic of culture is so big. I also feel like it's becoming a bit of a buzzword.
No doubt.
Uh, I feel like at times culture gets overpromised and underdelivered in the sense that, you know what, you just set your culture and all your problems are solved. It's the key. It's the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
And I've been down this culture road a lot with many different teams, including our Olympic team, including the teams that I coach, and now with coaches that I'm working with. What I believe about culture is that if you decide you want to build and set a culture, you better be very careful what you wish for, because it's easy to put words on a poster. It's easy to paint something and put it in a slogan in a locker room.
Yeah.
I don't know anything more difficult than enforcing. And I even when I listen to that word, I'm like, I don't even know if I like that word. Upholding. I like that word better. Upholding a culture. Because it's easy to set it, it's easy to put a poster up, but it's really hard to live that culture every single day because we are imperfect humans and we are going to stumble and we are going to break culture. Sometimes intentionally and knowingly, other times unintentionally, unconsciously. And I think what gets missed in the concept of culture is clarity around what breaks culture. I think we talk a lot about, oh, this is what we do. This is how we act. This is how we behave. This is how we walk into the gym. This is how we do our huddles. And I'm like, great. There's nothing wrong with that. But what never gets talked about, well, I shouldn't say never. What I think we
most of the time, yeah.
Okay. Then what I think we need to talk more about it. Here's what we do. But I'm like, hello, Captain Obvious. Whoop, whoop. I think what matters, what really defines culture, is here's what we don't do. And we lay it out. This is our culture breaks. When you say this, when you use this tone, when you do this, these are culture breaks. You've broken culture. And we lay it out so clearly. It's like we're giving them the answers to the exam before the exam comes. We're not trying to trick them.
Yeah.
And then here's our culture breaks. And when culture gets broken, this is how we handle it. Here's how athletes handle it. If you see a teammate breaking culture and there's not a coach there. Coaches, here's how you handle it when you see an athlete breaking culture. And coaches, here's how we handle each other when we see one of us as coaches breaking culture. And this gets laid out and defined as a group, and it gets agreed on as a group. And I'll tell you, the hardest part is the last piece. The accountability when we see it happening. And you want to know the hardest part of all? When you see your best player or you hear your best player breaking culture. It's not hard, it's less hard to hold your 12th player accountable. It is.
I think that's a good measuring stick for really where your culture is how difficult or how easy it is to hold your best player accountable, because you're right on the money. If there's a huge range between how quickly you're willing to pull the trigger, how hard you're willing to draw that line and not waver, yeah, the difference between those two.
And I believe that it's so important that we practice the hardest thing first, which is here's the breaks of culture and here's how we hold you accountable. Those things have to be practiced from day one. And when I work with teams, I actually tell them, you know what? Here's what I want you to do. First 2 weeks of your season, purposely break culture. Like Purposely do it. Tell your athletes, okay, today, and you can do this beforehand. Before practice today, here's 3 behaviors that I want somebody to do during practice today. And even have it as your
Does
coach.
everyone know, or just those 3, kind of like a one-on-one, hey, today, or do you let everybody know?
You can do it any way you want.
Because I think like almost that approach of with your best player, hey, I want you to be ultra negative when you are missed on the floor. One possess. Yeah, I don't know, but to your point too,
Sure.
experiment.
You can do it either way. But I guess all I'm saying is, like, think about the skills that we work on the court. The really difficult skills, we work on them a lot. We drill the heck out of them. Do you know how difficult it is to hold each other accountable? Why are we not working on it?
Yeah.
I think we need to role play it if we want to use this.
Yeah.
We need to practice breaking culture so that we can practice upholding the culture. It's difficult for athletes to hold each other accountable. And I'll tell you where it's really hard: for the 12th player to hold the leading scorer accountable. So think about all of the ways it's difficult to uphold culture. Why aren't we practicing that? And we should be practicing that the very first 2 weeks, so that by the end of the season, we are so darn good at it. We know exactly how it's going to roll, and we already know the bumps in the road because we've already worked those out.
Coach, it's really good. I wrote down the what breaks culture question. I love that you said it's not just a poster, a word on the back of a T-shirt. I feel like I talk about that a lot with a lot of coaches of what we really think culture is, or what we think it is, and what it actually is. And it's way beyond those great slogans that we have or the chants that we use. But I think a great question to ask as we're going through and building some of these, I don't even like that word culture, more like standards or pillars or the ways that we're going to show up every day. But that's with the group, what breaks it? Because you're right. Excellence is something that we try to live every day with our faith, the way that we show up as a player, the way we are as a teammate. It's not perfection. Perfection is impossible, but we do outline all of these things with excellence. But you know what I never did with them is talk about when excellence breaks down. Like, how does it break down? What does that look like? We just talk about the positive things we're going to do, kind of like this pie in the sky mentality of everything's going to work out if we just remember to do things this way. Well, it's not going to happen that way. What do we do? I think you highlighted just a great point there.
You know what else I think is important in that last statement is that breaking culture is normal.
Yeah.
It's part of imperfection. We don't all emotionally regulate the way that we should. We lose our temper. Our tone gets, we have an aggressive tone. Maybe sometimes we left the locker room messy just because we were in a hurry because we had to get somewhere and we kind of forgot. And the reason that I bring this up is that we're trying to create a culture that is full of psychological safety, which means I show up as my authentic self, and my authentic self is imperfect. And I don't have to be afraid of being imperfect in our culture, because we've learned that imperfection is normal. This is what the breaks are going to look like. Here's how we hold each other accountable. And this is normal behavior. It's not like, you know what? We need to have the culture police. And we go around catching each other being bad. I've seen that happen a lot in cultures. That's not what we're looking for.
Right.
We're looking for a group that says, you know what? I feel safe around you because you're going to help me become my greatest self. And on days where I don't show up as my greatest self, you remind me and you hold that standard back up for me. That's different than, hey, guess what? I caught you. XYZ. Those are different. And that decreases psychological safety. So psychological safety, basically, it means I feel safe to show up in your presence and take my armor off. When I don't feel safe in your presence, I'm going to armor up to protect myself. Now I'm going to hide. Now I maybe lie. Now I didn't say that. We want to normalize this imperfectness that we all have. And we want to normalize holding each other accountable for a higher standard.
I was trying to think of examples of ways that maybe I've role played or, without even realizing kind of what you're doing. It does go back to PGC for me because, as you know, shape shooting, especially at point guard college, that's a big part of what we do. I always try to tell our athletes that, guys, this is not about shooting. It's not a shooting drill. If this is the best shooting drill we can come up with, then we're not very good because it's just a line, pass, go to the end. There's better things we can do. But shape shooting is more. It's about how you transform and create a championship environment, no matter what the drill, no matter what you're doing with your team back home, and how to lead your teammates if you have some resistant ones. But one thing we do is, after 3 or 4 days of holding them to, and you've seen it, holding them to a pretty hard line. I feel like Tyler Cost used to say, we got to hold their feet to the fire. Like they need to feel like there's never this kind of let off moment, in Hunt and Huppy or whatever we're doing. We're going to hold those standards. And even though it is just 5 days, I mean, it's 9 hours over 5 every day, and it's a lot. So kind of like a mini season. You get to day 3 or 4, and what I used to do is I would say, okay, we're going to do shape shooting, but right now, let's take the shape out. You're going to take the shape out. You're just going to shoot. So what can't you do is no high fives, no spirit, walk, look bored. Don't encourage each other, yawn, like do it. Like, honestly, like everything opposite of what. And we would do it for a minute or two, no music. Coaches would just stand there and you see some kids, like, they still do. And then they drop their hand. They try to give a high five. They drop their hand. And I'd stop the whistle. I couldn't even take it for like a minute or two. I'd say, how'd that feel? And I was always blown away. The hands would shoot up there. Like, it felt awful, boring, like a losing environment. And I was like, guys, I think you would understand that most of us go home to gyms like that. And not all of us, but most of us. And our job is to never let this feeling happen again. And I just thought back to that, like role playing it with my team and some of the standards that we have. Like, I need to show them, we need to have times where we do the opposite and talk about what that felt like. So I think that, like, to your whole point, it'll ingrain our habits even more.
I would also like to add, I believe the most high-performing cultures, I'm going to speak on the piece about accountability, is that every athlete understands that the first person that they must lead is themselves. And that the first person that should hold me accountable is me. So that we're not in the policing. I saw you, you did that. We learned that this is a safe environment to be imperfect. And I noticed myself today speaking like this, not hustling the way that I should. And I step up and I hold me accountable.
Yeah.
Because the more I hold myself accountable, the less other people have to do it.
Yeah.
I don't think that gets built into culture either, where we show athletes it's safe to hold yourself accountable. In fact, it's courageous because it shows vulnerability, and vulnerability is a sign of courage.
At the end of our workouts, I typically will have an opportunity to celebrate, and where athletes will, throughout the workout, hopefully what they've been thinking about are things they've seen in others. But I do think that would be a great question to ask too, because if you created, like you've been talking about, this, environment where vulnerability is okay. And especially with our training, we want to make mistakes. Like we're pushing to that level. In fact, if you're going too slow and you're being careful and under control, then you're missing growth. But I think a great question would be to ask, like, who thought that they were just a little bit less than their best today? Or if anybody like to share about how they felt throughout the workout. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out a way, because I think if your older players, especially, or your leaders from the beginning, are open to say, coach, today I think I was a little bit less than my best. I just didn't bring it the way I normally want to. And then we can have dialogue about that. What are your thoughts on ways that we can create what you're talking about, where guys they're truly leading themselves first, but then acknowledging maybe when they're not bringing it?
Well, I like the idea that you've mentioned. My addition would be, I think as we're first learning how to do this, because this is a skill, right? And it's a difficult skill, right? We talked about choose your hard. This is freaking hard.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of groups of 2 or 3.
Nice.
Because when we open it up to the group, we know the first people to speak are the ones that are the most confident, or the extroverts. So the introverts get overlooked. The people that aren't as confident, or the people that feel that they're too low on the totem pole to have a voice.
Yeah.
If we go small groups, so groups of 2 or 3, and you can say, hey, just share in your group. Was there anything today where you felt like you didn't show up as your greatest self? And if you had a do-over, what would you have done differently? So you do it small first. It's a little safer when it's small, and then everyone gets to speak. Then you bring it back to the big group and say, is there anybody that would like to share the conversation with all of us?
Love that. How many programs do you think start off with, it's almost like you're starting off with the negative side, or the opposite of what you want your culture to be? When you're talking about what breaks cultures, I think some coaches might look at that as like, why would I want to bring up the negative parts of it? Like, that's the stuff we don't want to do. Let's focus on the side of it that we do want to do, with the exception, like giving high fives. Oh, we can never not give high fives, right? Like double negative. Like, why would we focus on that side? How many programs do you think do start with what could harm our culture? Like, what could be negative?
I don't think very many do it, because it's what sport teaches us. Sport teaches us only to look at the positive. We're not allowed. We're not allowed to be sad. We're not allowed to be unconfident. We're not allowed to be nervous. We're not allowed all of these things that sport says, don't do that. But I know when I work with my athletes, I'm like, if you're going to come and work here with me, we're going to speak the truth. And the truth is, we want a great culture. And the truth is, we're not always going to have it. I just feel like if we don't address, here are the breaks, I'll tell you what I think happens. Do you remember I asked that question myself, what did I see but refused to acknowledge? I think we end up seeing a whole bunch of things that we don't like because we never talked about them.
And we try to act like we're in this fairy tale land where, hey guys, everything's good, kumbaya, but deep down, and do you have the courage to start the year? Sorry, I just got excited.
Well, and again, so if I said to a coach says, well, I don't want to address a negative, I'm like, well, why not? Why are we it's going to happen. And if you don't talk about it, it's easy to say, I didn't see it.
Yeah.
When you did. And then you don't have a culture. I just think now you don't have a culture. Or it's a fake culture, or it's the culture that we're rah and we're really good at shape shooting.
Yeah, it's a fake culture.
Yeah. You should hear how we stab each other in the back when other people aren't listening. Like I see a lot of what I call it's a fake culture. It's a social media culture.
Yep. It's the
And
hashtag, and
yeah,
there's nothing wrong with those. There's a lot of creative ones. I'm not that smart, and so I don't have a cool one that we do. But no, you know what? This is something too that helped me, or I guess when I first started, as a high school coach, and I've been a head coach only 11 years, so I still have a ton to learn. But started just pulling acronyms or cultures from other groups. So when I started directing with PGC, of course, after that summer, shape on the back of our practice jerseys, guys, shape is our culture. These are the six things that and then after a few years, I realized, man, some of these guys that especially didn't go to PGC, they don't really care for this because it doesn't look like shape. It looks like scape, and they don't get it. And they're a little annoyed by some of the things. Like I was so over the top with it, and then, but man, we would be rawing and standing and stuff, but there's a lot of fakeness to it. And then this word Jamodi was personal to me since 7th grade. And I looked at each of the letters. I was like, okay, how could I take shape and kind of make, so spirit, joy, J is joy. And so approach, attitude. And so I forced Jamodi down their throat. Finally, just kind of tired and fed up with all of those things, I had my assistant coaches and a few of our former players come and say, okay, the last few years, what are some of the words that we actually use? What are the ways that we actually show up and the things we do care about? Things like excellence and humility, and enthusiasm. And so it was a fun activity to discard all of the systems that I had really been trying to force on our guys and try to figure out what's really important to us. How do we, what can we truly, or what do we want to hold each other accountable on? And then it became something that is not an acronym. I don't think I could ever make it one. It's not a word. But it's us and real and important to the guys. Now every day I'm trying to evaluate, is it really important to them? I have great kids, strong families. They're yes or no sir people, and so they could fake it, but be pretty believable. So that I think, I don't know, my whole journey in this is to have some pillars and some standards. I love the idea of doing the reverse of these. What does a lack of humility look like? How can that show up throughout a season? And discuss those. I think that's, super powerful in our culture where being negative, and I don't feel like this is really being negative. Like you said, it's truth, but it is almost shunned or looked down upon, or we just got to stay positive. Everything is awesome, like that Lego movie. And I think telling the truth, I think, is huge with this.
Well, remember, we're wired for ice cream. And what I mean by that is we will choose ice cream over vegetables all day long. I will. Why? Because ice cream feels better. This is our culture. This is our chant. Here's what's on the back of our t-shirts. This is what's in the locker room. And I'd be like, awesome. Those are my favorite kinds of ice cream. And then I'd be like, okay, now where are the vegetables? I know they're vegetables. Show me them. Where are the vegetables? Oh, we don't have any. Yes, you do. We all have our vegetables. The things that we don't like to eat, the things that taste crappy, poopy. And that's why I've just believed so much in having the courage to speak the truth. Because the truth is, sport brings us ice cream and vegetables. And so if we don't address both, why not? We're hiding from one of the truths.
Coaches, the Jamodi podcast is powered by Ballogy. Manage and measure your players' skill development and increase accountability year-round utilizing the Ballogy app. Boost inter-squad competition with drills backed by the National High School Basketball Coaches Association, including a 40-shot Ballogy skills assessment. Please visit ballogy.com/teams for information on how you can provide this resource for your team. I've always felt like culture doesn't just erode in a day, but it's kind of slow slippage. And it's those maybe like those courageous moments that we don't take, where we choose fear instead. Coach, how do you know? What are some warning signs when it might be slipping, when it may be becoming that fake culture that we don't want?
I believe that if we believe that culture is important, what matters gets measured. And I keep thinking about how culture, like we do this all at the beginning. We have the t-shirts and the chants and all of the things. And then I'm like, well, do we ever do any check-ins? Or, well, wow, our chant was really loud today. Yeah, we're killing it with our culture. I guess what I would ask if we are going to have a culture is, how do we know when it's working? How do we know when it's not working? Is kind of, I believe, what you've asked.
Yeah.
Why are we not talking about it on a weekly basis? Right? So, I mean, we think about all the things that coaches talk about, and it's usually technical, tactical. Why are we not talking as a staff in our staff meeting once a week, where right in one of those meetings, it's like, okay, we're spending half an hour, 20 minutes, 30, 15 minutes. How's our culture doing? Where is it? Where are we seeing slippage? Is anyone seeing slippage in themselves? And then we're asking our athletes to do the same things. What about our captains? What are our captains speaking about? Are they seeing slippage? Again, if we don't have anything to measure, that's where I come back to. If we don't talk about culture breaks, how do we measure when our culture's not working? What, we didn't chant loud enough? That's how we decide. That's why I come back to what matters gets measured. And I believe that culture needs to be integrated.
Yeah.
In the same way that our shooting drills are integrated, the same way what I believe about mental toughness. Integrated means it's part of our daily training environment. It isn't just something at the beginning and something at the end.
It's not just that the quote at the top of your practice plan that you read in 1 minute. Culture done, boom. Now let's get to the important stuff. TJ, yeah. TJ Rosine, to me, is one of the best coaches in America. He's a PGC guy, and he's known for just basically culture moments happen all throughout your practice, and he's one of the most aware, and almost like he is scanning for those moments constantly. And to me, that's a way where, yeah, in this particular 3-on-3 game, we have these 3 areas of focus. He can't have 12 areas, these 3. But all throughout that 3-on-3 game, there are going to be culture moments happening where either it's reinforcing the habits we want that are positive, or those negative things, the things we said we weren't going to do, or that breaks down or takes away. Those are going to happen. But how many times do we turn a blind eye or not even see it because we're focused on the 3 technical pieces we're trying to get done? I don't know. I wonder how much stronger our culture would be if I'm going to prioritize things throughout my practice, my workout, the effort, obviously, execution, yes, but that's all under the umbrella of standards. And those moments where those standards doesn't, forget execution, forget effort's probably in there, with the standards, but we have to address those things, or else slippage, in my opinion, starts to happen.
Well, if we come back to what I've said, what matters gets measured. If you think about our competitive drills, what do we measure? Who won? We score there's one. Okay, you scored. There's a 3-point shot. That's what we measure. But I believe that if we think culture matters, because culture is about behavior, why are we not adding that to our competitive drills? So you get 1 for a basket, and when a great behavior shows up that upholds our culture, that's also worth 1. And so is the opposite. When you break culture in a drill, that's -1. Why don't we find ways to measure it in what we're already doing?
I love that. To me, one of the ways, again, it is going back to PGC a lot here, which makes sense, right? Because they are so good. I mean, it shaped your life in a big way and mine too. When we play games, we don't use the traditional rules of just like points like that, or we use Divenzio out of bounds, but more importantly, like fouls or things we call violations. But our violations are there to help us build the habits that we really want. So a lack of pointing to a passer is a violation that takes the point away. Right. That's, to me, that's an example of like, you could expand that, right? Like a moment where a dude takes a charge and all 4 guys come over and pick him up. That's a point. Or the flip side, because I do like the idea of, the violations being more of a negative thing that takes them away from what they really want, which is to win. You don't pick your teammates up. That point doesn't count. Or that's a point for the other. I don't know, something like that.
I'm agreeing with you. And I'm even just other behaviors, such as somebody hanging their head after a missed shot.
Yep.
Right? Those happen in the middle of it. Somebody with a tone of voice that's attacking or like just in the wrong time, like in someone's face. Those are culture breaks. I would also go as far to say this: coaches need to be included.
Yeah.
And if you
coach, that's tough. No, hold on. Don't put us in the same category as our players. We get to rant and rave and act like a lunatic as much as we want, and they just have to take it, coach. That's
just don't listen to the tone. Right. Just listen to the message. Oh, give me a break.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So that's, again, here's what I believe that happens also with culture is athletes feel like it's only applied to them. And if this is truly a culture, it has to apply to all of us. So how are coaches being measured and held accountable? I mean, let's just say an example. You've got yourself an assistant coach. Sometimes teams don't have that, but if you did, well, then head coaches with the red team, assistant coach with the white team, and their behaviors count towards the score, and their behavior can detract from the score. If we're truly going to do this, if it truly is us, who is us?
Yeah. Coach, that's going to hit. It hits me. I'm sure it's going to hit a bunch of coaches out there. And again, another way that I felt like PGC was, I was a different guy when I left than when I went in there. And they're not a sponsor of the podcast. I told Mono I would love for them to be, but they have Hardwood Hustle, whatever. But it is one thing to hold our young people or whatever age your athletes are accountable and demand those standards for them. But how much more powerful would it be if we were holding ourselves to those standards? But that's difficult.
Well, do you remember we talked a few minutes ago about holding ourselves accountable, and we talked about you could do small groups where somebody said, you know what, I caught myself doing this. Here's what I do of how to do over. Well, when the athletes are having discussion, what are the coaches doing? Normally what happens in this, the coaches stand there and listen to what everyone else is saying. I'm like, no, then that's not us. Why aren't coaches having the exact same conversations that the athletes are having? Where coach could be like, you know what, I felt myself disengaged in one of the drills today. That wasn't my greatest self. If I had a do-over, here's what I would have done differently. Culture is, well, there's a great saying that culture flows downhill. So I always look at the top of the river. And if the top of the river be like, yeah, we have a great culture here, but all I do is I police it.
But it doesn't apply to me. So
I'm like, there, you just told me about your culture. Okay.
Yeah. Coach, that's good. That hits hard. It's convicting.
Well, it's where I started at the very beginning. If we're going to become the greatest version of ourselves, we have to take a walk inside. We have to do heart work because that's where the truth is. But many of us don't like to face the truth. It's uncomfortable. It's the vegetables. But we ask our athletes to do it all the time.
And I think if we're honest with ourselves, what do we look back and regret or wish that we could change? It's rarely the times where we were right in line with the culture we're asking our players to be. It's the times when we deviate from that. The locker room rant where you just lose your stuff. The coach, I used to always show our athletes, if anybody remembers the movie Old School with Will Ferrell and those guys. Well, Will Ferrell comes into the locker room. It's these bunch of adults that are trying to win this competition. And he's just burned himself. So he's in his whitey tighties. But that Luke Wilson's character is saying, hey, guys, we're doing fine. Let's just keep our composure. He's very positive. Let's just keep going. And Will Ferrell comes in and grabs a chair. We've come too far. We've got to keep our composure. Nobody freak out. And he's like hitting the chair on the walls. It's like the coach that yells at his team, stop freaking out, calm down. But you're not even calm. Much easier to tell our players to do things, harder to hold us. But those are those moments where my wife after a game says, Matt, your face tonight, it was just too much. Like I was too mean looking, those are the things we regret, not the moments where we were holding ourselves to the same standards.
I think what's interesting about that is I'm a big believer when we do this inner work, we really have to dig down in the sense that I believe that we don't change behavior by addressing the behavior. We have to go underneath and see what's driving it. So when coaches lack emotional regulation, when they have hissy fits all the time, when they pull players for mistakes, when they have that face, whatever your wife was referring to, what I think is super interesting is why.
Yeah.
Where's it coming from? Because if we don't change that, it's really difficult to manage the behavior because we haven't addressed the root cause, what's driving that behavior. I don't think very many coaches have ever gone inside and asked, why do I behave that way? Why do I have hissy fits when something goes wrong? Why do I overtalk all of the time? Why do I dominate the locker room? Why do I dominate whatever? We don't very often go in there and ask why, because again, it's a vegetable. Because we might not like the answer.
In an effort to have this kind of environment that we've been talking about, I have thought about those things, and just transparency from my end is, I think it comes back to insecurities of, am I really good at this? Is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? And can I really lead these guys? And so I think over talking a lot of times comes from that, this obsession with trying to show them how smart, how competent, and how trustworthy I am, instead of keeping things nice and simple. And I think that the hissy fits, even last year, the moments where on film when I'm watching huddle and I just feel like I need to mute it, I think it comes from being outcome based. As much as I like to say that I'm process based, and I believe in that, and we're trying to every day push ourselves to be 1% better, to train harder than last time, there's still that part of me, though, that from my old coaches, the way maybe I was coached, or that I still get that validation from winning, that validates that, yes, I'm good at this and this is something I should do. And that outcome based part comes where I think that's where those moments come from. But that is something, it's not just, I didn't just come up with that right now. I've thought about that quite a bit, books like Burn Your Goals and things like that that really challenge PGC and that challenge the why behind everything that we're doing with our athletes. But like you said, it's not fun to go down those rabbit holes, but necessary.
Well, the opposite of fear is courage. And I believe that we have to face our deepest fears for our greatest self to show up. And again, why would we want to do that? Because it's not very fun. It's not very comfortable. In all of the clients that I work with, so athletes, parents, coaches, and I also do a lot of corporate coaching, the most fearful clients that I work with are coaches. And the two fears that come up when I dig down, I'm go, why? Why do you behave like that? Why do you react like that? React is different than respond. Why do you react like that? And their deepest fear is losing. But that isn't quite it. We're not afraid of things. Losing is a thing. We're afraid of our feelings. And the feelings that come with losing are the fear of disapproval. I call it FOPO. That isn't mine. I heard it from somewhere else. FOPO, fear of people's opinions. So it's not losing that we're afraid of. What will people think?
Yeah.
What do I think? And so we spend a lot of time in hissy fits, over talking, pulling athletes for mistakes, because we tend to do this very often in our coaching behaviors. So we manipulate behavior using blame, shame, and guilt. So if I yell at you, you'll change your behavior and then we can win more. I'll shame you. I'll blame you. I'll pull you out for mistakes, because the goal of all of it is I want you to play better so that we don't lose. That's why I have to be the smartest person in the room, because obviously none of you are even close to smart enough to figure out how we're going to win today.
Yeah.
And I did this I'm right there with, I did this for all the years that I was a head coach, but I didn't know it. I didn't have this understanding of what was really going on underneath the surface. And a lot of how we act and react as coaches, it's, this is it. Okay. So I get, so many athletes that I work with, one of those things that Shawnee, what do I do? I don't know what to do when coach yells at me. I don't know what to do when coach embarrasses me. I don't know what to do when coach points me out in front of the group. I don't know what to do when coach pulls me when I make a mistake and then comes down and gets in my face. Just write all of the coaching behaviors that we see and do. So I said this to athletes. I said, what if you thought about it like this? When coach does those things, what if you said in your head, Coach, thank you for showing me your fear. I said, what if you, and they're like, what? And I'm like, think about it. So then I explained FOPO and I said, your coach's biggest fear is losing. So when they're afraid of losing, how's that going to show up? Oh, they're going to yell. They're going to have hissy fits. They're going to pull you from mistakes. They're going to get in your face. They're going to yell at the refs. They're going to have all of this nonverbal body language going on. And then you just look at that and you go, oh, coach is just showing me their fear. I said, would that change how you view your coach? So again, I'm coming back to, as leaders, the first person we have to lead as a coach is the first person we have to lead is ourselves. And we spend a lot of time thinking we need to lead our athletes. It begins right here. We have to face our deepest fears.
I feel like there's a lot of books out there about FOPO, on the coaching side, especially with parents, administrators, our own players. To me, I'm going to ask you the question. I'm not trying to answer it, but my thought is that it really comes down to your why as a coach. Like, what are you actually doing this for? not just where you're trying to get out of it, and then also maybe where your identity lies. Is this really all that's wrapped up? Like when I was a younger player, you open up my chest, I felt like a basketball was there. That was my identity, and it fell apart my senior year in college, and I went down a really bad path for about 9 years. And then life changed and identity changed, and what I was reaching towards or who I was reaching towards changed. But how do you help coaches that have that fear that's bringing it out in those different ways?
I believe that the first way that we handle it is we face it. Right? I'm a big fan of F words. Feelings are an F word. Fear is an F word. Face is an F word. And I really believe that that's where it begins, that we face our deepest fears. And where I think that we go with that is, like, if you think that I'm trying to say, you know what, we just have to like losing better. There, fix the fear. That is not what I'm saying. My business is called Winning Matters.
Yeah, just get used to losing. There you go.
Or be like, you know what? If you don't want to have hissy fits all the time, stop caring. There,
you said my business is Winning Matters. Yeah.
So where I'm going with it is, what if we could just get better at tolerating uncomfortable feelings? Like, what if we can just say, you know what? I effing hate losing. I hate losing. And it makes me sometimes become a crazy woman because I'm trying so hard to win. I'd be like, yep, that's me. I'd be like, you know what? But I've got this toolkit where I just catch myself. And now I'm learning to catch myself before I become really crazy. I'm only a little bit crazy, and then I catch myself being a little bit crazy. What I believe mental toughness, the most important parts of mental toughness are emotional intelligence and self-awareness. Be like, oh, here I am. There's my fear showing up. That's why I pulled that player as soon as they made a mistake. Oh, that's my fear showing up. Oh, good to know. We don't have to get rid of our fear. I said, face it. I didn't say get rid of it. I hope that every coach listening wants to win. If you have a choice, you're going to win or you're going to lose. What you're going to pick? Hello? But when it becomes so important that we engage in what I call striving and resisting. Striving means trying hard to fill in the blanks. And when we're striving hard to, it means we are also resisting, trying hard not to. And those two things are happening at the same time. What if we could get better at finding a place in the middle called accepting, allowing? Because the truth is, one of two things is going to happen every single time your team plays. You're either going to win or you're going to lose. Why do we have to be fearful of one of the truths? Those truths will never, ever leave. But we fear this one. And we go, why do I fear it? Because I'm afraid of what people are going to think. And we go, oh, well, you know what? Whose opinion's the most important? Mine. Oh, okay. So what do I think about me if we don't win? So that, I think that is really, really helpful, because I think we forget on what matters gets measured. And when winning's the only thing that matters, the only thing that we know how to measure ourselves is the scoreboard. What about, I can handle losing. I didn't say I liked it. I can handle it if I showed up and I led with my values. Goals are what we do. Values are who we are. Was I proud of myself today and how I showed up in that loss? Was I proud of how our players battled through the loss? I think we forget about those things because we are resisting losing with every ounce of our fiber. And yet losing is one of the truths.
Yeah.
I believe the most dangerous teams are the ones that aren't afraid to lose.
How do you get that message across? Like that message right there to your team? Obviously, it has to come from you. You have to feel that, believe that. But I just feel like that's so, I don't know. It's not something that's talked about, or it's counter.
Again, it's one of those things. Ooh, we're not allowed to talk about that. That's why I think we get so unhealthy as coaches. We're not allowed to think about losing. We're not allowed to say, hey, you know what? It was okay. I didn't like it, but it didn't break me.
Yeah.
Be like, oh no, we're about winning, and like all of the things that sport causes us to do, and it makes us become crazy people. That concept of the most dangerous teams are the ones that aren't afraid to lose. Another way of saying that is in the last 3 minutes of a 1-point game on championship day. Are you playing to win or are you playing not to lose? The teams that are playing not to lose tend to choke.
Yeah.
And underperform. But if you weren't afraid to lose, how would you play? Don't you think that's a freaking great question to ask your athletes? And don't wait for championship Sunday, Monday. Why are we not asking that from the very beginning of the season? When we step on the court, practice number 1, first competitive drill. How would you compete in this drill right now if you weren't afraid to lose? What would you do right now in this drill if you weren't afraid to make mistakes? If you weren't afraid to mess up? If you weren't afraid to miss a shot? If you weren't afraid to get blocked? If you weren't afraid to go for a steal? If you weren't afraid to jump in and double team, even though that's not the rule? So this concept, the teams that are the most dangerous are the ones that aren't afraid to lose. You can understand how difficult that is, but I believe this becomes part of a courageous culture.
Yeah.
We teach it from day one. We reward courage. We measure courage and we reward courage. What a concept.
Yeah.
I don't see it being done anywhere.
I was just going to say, obviously, there's a difference between professional sports and high school. You could even say it's college is more professional now than ever before.
Sure.
But I watch Hard Knocks about the NFL teams. You know, they have the preseason Hard Knocks, and then they have the in season, and you get this behind the scenes look into these huge professional football teams, these organizations. They have so many coaches. You just see the things we've been talking about. Unfortunately, just an absence of that. I mean, it's just almost the other way. You see maybe glimpses here and there, and a coach is trying to maybe be more transformational even in that. But then you see the players maybe mimicking the behaviors that the coaches are portraying or showing off. But yeah, those are professionals where winning and their jobs are on the line, and there's millions on the line, but they choose to go the fear-based path, I feel like, quite a bit.
I think professional sport is such it's almost its own beast. I mean, the risk reward is just so high. I mean, we're talking millions and millions of dollars. I don't have great answers at that professional level because I almost feel like there comes a time for all of us where our habits and our narratives and our beliefs are so ingrained that it's really, really difficult to change. I think we have such great opportunity at the developmental levels, at the grassroots levels, at the high school levels, and the junior high levels. And I'll throw this in. as something for us to consider. I talked about facing our fears, and I talked about the fear of people's opinions. What I've learned with talking with athletes, and what I've also learned by doing my own soul searching, is the opinion that we tend to be most afraid of is our own. And one of the reasons that we cannot handle losing, we cannot handle mistakes, we cannot handle looking bad, is because the self-judgment is so high. And when the self-judgment is high, think about how high the fear, the anxiety, and the nerves become. And so we get into, I'm going to do everything in my power to win, because if I don't, the self-judgment is going to be crushing. What if we could teach our athletes that imperfection is normal? Mistakes are normal, missing shots are normal, losing is normal, getting beat on defense is normal. The opposite of judgment is one of my favorite F words: forgive. Nobody loses on purpose. No one misses a shot on purpose. No one makes a mistake on purpose. Why are we so lousy at forgiving ourselves? I think because sport teaches us the opposite. Sport rewards us for self-judgment. Sport rewards us for being angry at ourselves for 3 days, 4 days after a big loss. You know what I work with? So coaches that I work with would be like, yeah, Shawnee, my athletes are really hard on themselves. And I can tell they take great pride.
Pride. Yeah. Like a badge of honor.
And I'm like, so? I said, why are you so proud of that?
Yeah.
And they're like, I catch them off guard. And athletes, I work with a lot of athletes that come in and I'll be like, so what do you do when you make a mistake? And so they tell me, and what do? They throw themselves under the bus, negative self-talk, and they're proud of it.
Yeah.
It's a badge of honor. And I'm like, that is why we fear losing. Because we don't fear losing. It's a thing. We fear the feelings. Fear of judgment is a feeling. Negative self-talk. All of these things, these are feelings that we can't tolerate. And so then I say, well, instead of self-judgment, what would happen if you practice forgiveness? And athletes, they resist it, and they're like, what? They're like, I'm supposed to be nice to myself? I think that question itself is so interesting. And I'm like, well, why can't you just try forgiving? I said, did you do it on purpose? No. Well, why can't you forgive yourself then? But sport has taught us that that is not okay. And I think the same happens with coaches. They cannot forgive themselves when they lose because it's a slam on their self-worth, what they think people think.
Yeah.
I think forgiveness, you know what? I never knew this as an athlete. I didn't know this as a coach. I didn't know any of this. And now I understand why losing was so difficult for me, because I couldn't get out of the self-judgment, the self-flagellation. And I didn't know what to do with it. And eventually it just would kind of leave, because then we'd have a new game, a new opponent. So I would kind of forget eventually about the crappy feelings that I was having, because then there'd be another game, but then the crappy feelings, like it was just this roller coaster. It was like being in the dryer. It just keeps happening, going round and round and round. If we're going to be courageous, if we're going to face the truth, and the truth is you're going to win or you're going to lose. You're going to make a shot, you're going to miss a shot. I believe to face the uncomfortable truth, we have to become better at forgiving ourselves when that truth happens.
think you're right. The pro teams, it's a different animal. It's a different beast. And I was thinking of that. It's very short term.
Right.
Like they're only focused on what will bring me the maximum results now.
Right.
And there's an idea that fear, that sheer panic that you see them sometimes and rage that they have, that it could maybe bring something out in just that 1 second that they need. But I think a important thing for myself and high school coaches and, like you said, grassroots is, man, this is long term. Like, I don't think we can view it as what can I get out of them today without thinking of what the consequences will be tomorrow, a week, a year, more years from now. So I think for me, a big takeaway from that is just to remember, like, I'm in the long game here. I'm playing the long game, and what's going to help them 5 years, 10 years down as a parent, as somebody, it's going to be to help them to understand, have a healthy look at what losing really is and what it means and how to deal with it. And, but I appreciate you sharing all those things. That was really impactful.
I thought of one more thing to add. Remember, I said the quote, the most dangerous teams are the ones that aren't afraid to lose. And you said, how do you help your team become that? What if we taught, if this was part of our culture, this is how we did our drills from day one. We just taught courage. It is okay to risk. It's okay to take chances. It's okay to fail. It's okay to look bad. What if we started with all of that? And then on the most important day of their lives, they'll be like, you know why we're dangerous? Because we're not afraid to lose. Because we can handle that if it happens. It's the self-trust that this winning isn't going to make me and losing isn't going to break me. I'm more than either of those, because we fear failure. We fear losing because really deep inside, we believe we can't handle it. We believe we aren't going to be okay. What if we could believe that we are going to be okay? The sun is going to come up. I'm going to still like me.
Yeah.
That's how we know we're going to be okay. I'm going to still like me. That's how we become dangerous. That's how we stop fearing losing, because it's like, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to come in today and I am going to do everything in my power to kick ass. And after that, the chips will fall where they may. And no matter which way the chips fall, I'm going to be okay. What if a coach could say that?
And that was going to be my point, is a one way we could help our athletes to really get to that point is by them believing and knowing which coach they're going to get the next day after the loss. One of the terrifying things for me as a player was not knowing which guy's showing up tomorrow. We'd ask each other, have you seen him? Have you seen which yeah, how is he today? So after a loss on Friday night against a district rival, my players need to know the way that I'm going to show up on Saturday, which is with smiles, music, energy, high fives. So glad to see you. And approaching that day, maybe there are some things we did wrong, but man, we're going to take steps to improve, but we're not going to. I think that might help our teams to, in the middle of the game, after the game, not be so fearful or in their feelings about that loss.
I think that's so well said. And it goes back to the term I used a little bit earlier called psychological safety. Because if I'm talking to my teammate, oh my goodness, which coach is going to show up today? Do you see right away I'm armored up?
Yeah.
I know I'm feeling like, oh my goodness, am I going to have to protect myself from you today? The opposite. So that's not psychological safety. The opposite is win, lose, or draw. I don't have to protect myself from my coach today.
Coaches, the Jamodi podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot 360, the future of basketball is here. speaking, we've been talking about losing quite a bit, and I have that in our questions is how do you handle defeat with your team? I had the pleasure of talking with Coach Doug Novak, and I'm not sure if you're familiar, but in the race in space world of that kind of offense of players making plays, not just running plays, he's like one of the godfathers of it. Like, kind of came up with a lot of these systems that other guys are using, and I was blown away. He said he answered this question. He said, Matt, one of the first things I do at the beginning of the season is we talk about how we're going to handle loss. Like, what are we going to do when we lose? How are we going to talk? How are we going to show up? And it really reinforces, I think, a lot of what we said. But is there anything else, like with your team, how would you handle it with them, like, right after the locker room, in the locker room with your team the next day?
You know what I thought of before I answer the question specifically is, how do we handle losing every day in our practices? Because somebody loses a drill every single day in practice.
Yeah.
Our sport culture says that when you lose a drill, you get punished. You have to run. I just think it begs the question, if we believe losing is one of the truths, if we believe losing is as normal as winning, why do we punish it? And you know what? I find this topic is there's just so many ways.
So are you saying that we shouldn't? Like, let's just say, hey, we're playing a 3-on-3 game. The loser has a consequence. I don't even know the thousands of times that I've said that. And, and that's not always bad running, but 5-10 push-ups or whatnot. Is your advice to not do that, and just to basically, I mean, I think what we're getting at is to try to create an environment where they all want to win and want to improve and push each other just for the sheer reason of doing that, of improving, but not fear of what are we going to have to do after this little game.
I don't know what you're advising.
I need an answer.
I just think it's so.
You're right, though. You're right.
I think it's so freaking interesting to think about, because I just look back on my 20 years of elite. Well, it was more longer, whatever. 25 years of elite coaching. I look back on all the things that I did, and I'm like, if I could go back and do it differently, what are some things that I would do differently? And I always remembered thinking, if I could do a poll for my athletes, how many of them, like 15 minutes before practice, half an hour before practice, are like, man, I can't wait to get to practice today? And how many of them were like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? How many am I going to be able to handle all the suicides if our team loses? What if coach says? So you asked me, is my advice to not punish losing? What if we just thought a little more deeply about it? What if we just said, you know what? What if we just tried it? What if we just tried it one practice or for a whole week? What if you just tried it for a week and said, here's the drill, here's what we're measuring, and we're including culture things. It's not just points and who wins by points. So here's how we're measuring it. And at the end, we will have a winner and we will have a loser. And the winning team, you're going to go over there and you're going to debrief with yourselves. Why do you think you won? The losing team, you're going to go over and you're going to debrief with yourselves. Why do you think you lost? Isn't that what happens after games? Well, actually, that's not true. I've seen coaches make their teams run.
Oh, brutal.
I've seen that. But what if, so I guess all I'm coming back to is there's a reason. No. Fear is learned. And if fear is learned, who's teaching it? If you have a group of athletes and you just tell them to go out and play in their backyard, do you think they're afraid of getting their butts whooped? Nope. So if fear is learned, who's teaching it? We are.
So, yeah, I think it's a light bulb moment for me right there. What do we want as coaches? We want players that are competitive. What makes kids really competitive? Like if I had to rate my players from most competitive to least, the guys that are most, it's intrinsic. Like
Right.
it's inside of them and they just bring it. Why? Because they want to win, because it's inside of them. And then there's the ones that all the way down to they could care less or they're afraid of losing. But then without realizing it, we're creating this extrinsic motivation or fear of losing, which is if I lose, pain will come.
Right.
And I'm just guilty of it because you said, oh, you've seen people make them run. And I go, oh, brutal. But basically, I'm doing that to them in smaller chunks, not in front of their family and friends. But it's all about how you frame it. If I frame it to the guys of the goal is to win, like we're competing to win. They're keeping score. There's a score in this game. Your goal is to win. Man, think of the culture pieces or the culture breaks that you could maybe celebrate the positive reaction to a loss, which in my opinion, and I've tried to talk to this with the guys, what do you do when you lose, man? As to one of your teammates, you slap them, give them a high five or low five. You say, great job, man. You were awesome. And you take it, you learn from it, and then you just grit your teeth and get excited to play again. But they don't even have that chance because they're doing push-ups or they're getting on the line and running, and then they're just pissed off. And do they really want to compete again after they've done that? No, they probably just want to stop and go on to something else or leave. And yeah, just maybe like a light bulb moment of, instead of being the coach that complains that his players don't care as much as he does, teach them that just what it feels like to win, how to appropriately lose. And I love that we do debrief a lot, but usually it's after the consequence. So they're in a really good mood to talk about why they lost as a team and diagnose it. But man,
what if we even so if we come back to where did we start? We come back with the most dangerous teams are the ones that aren't afraid to lose. I mean, I just feel like that's such a humongous statement. To me, that means as a coach, we've taught our players that in the last 3 minutes in a 1-point game, we're not afraid. We've learned, because we practice it every day, we've learned that we will be okay, win, lose, or draw. We've also learned that in a 1-point game in the last 3 minutes, it's a storm. But it's an emotional storm. It's not a physical storm. It's an emotional storm. And we've learned how to handle those emotional storms every single day in practice. Because often the teams that win in the last 3 minutes are the ones that problem solved. They figured out how to get a great shot. They figured out how to come out of the timeout and run the thing that the coach diagrammed. But more importantly, they figured out what to do with all of the feelings that come up in the last 3 minutes of a close game. Well, it's the same in every competitive drill. Do you not think a competitive drill heightens the feelings of your players? And when the losers run, the feelings that get heightened are fear. How in the world is that going to help you in the championship game if they don't know how to handle their fear?
Yeah.
But we put the fear into them because we learned, like sport teaches us, the only way we can grow is we have to punish failure. Remember I talked earlier about we manipulate behavior using blame, shame, and guilt. What is punishment? It's manipulation of behavior.
I feel like I've learned a lot from you in this talk already, because while you're talking, I just hope I'm not just sitting here thinking of questions or my response. Like I hear it and I'm listening, but I did think of something a second ago. What about those kids that don't seem to care about winning and losing? They're not that competitive. But then I felt like your answers kind of already flooding my mind of, well, that's our job. Like, welcome to coaching. How can we get this young man that may or has this team with different levels of care, understanding and learning how to compete and the why behind they should compete, but then also teaching them, not just he doesn't care, get on the line. You guys don't. I don't know. I just feel like we have to be better than resulting to pain, punishment, consequences, and figure out the why behind they don't want to compete. What's holding them back from not competing? Like, I feel like you got more inside of you. What's holding you back from unleashing what you have? I don't ask those questions because they lost. I feel like they're not competitive. That's why they lost. So what's the best way? They're going to run. And I'm not saying me, because we like to play fast. We don't run a ton as punishments, but we do towel pushes. We do push-ups. There's something negative at the end of it. So I'll ask the question, even though that was happening in my mind at the same time. I think a lot based on the concepts you've been discussing. What do you do with those athletes that just don't seem to have a competitive bone in their body? They could care less about winning or losing, or at least they show that on the outside.
I believe it's a defense mechanism. Because remember, defense mechanisms protect us. And it's easier to lower the bar than raise the bar. I don't know anyone that I'm like, okay, we're going to do a drill right now, and here's your choice. You either can win or lose. I don't know anyone that would pick losing. But I can tell you right now, there's a lot of them that are afraid of winning. We talk a lot, we talk about fear of failure. We don't talk about fear of success. There's a lot of athletes that I've worked with that so I use this concept of a light. I said, do you know there's a really bright light inside of you? So why are you dimming it? Now think about where that conversation's going to go. Holy cows, it's so awesome when I get to have these conversations. And they're like, they don't even know what I'm talking about when I say that at the beginning. And I'll be like, well, why do you slack off? How come you don't work as hard as you could? How come whatever it is, how come you don't hustle? How come whatever? How come you don't seem to care? And what I show them is you're dimming your light, because when you dim your light, people expect less from you. And now it will be easy to not disappoint them.
Yeah.
We get into these defense mechanisms. I will also say that in my experience working with athletes, the ones that we're talking about here, they don't have a competitive bone in their body. They don't seem to care, blah, blah, blah. You know what I believe? Because I've worked with a lot of those. Their self-esteem and their self-worth is very, very low. And when our self-esteem is low, when our self-worth is low, our actions match. We can't be like, you know what? I think so highly of myself, but you know what? I walk around all day as a slacker. No, that isn't how it works. Our deep-seated beliefs about who we are show up in our everyday actions. And the athletes that give up, don't try hard, seem like they don't care. They have low self-esteem. And when they lose, they're like, see, yep, I knew it. It matches their self-esteem. It matches their self-worth. So again, I'm coming back to, how do we change that? There's another question. Because we're talking about winning and losing. I'm like, that's the wrong freaking focus. Why are we not talking about their values? Because low self-esteem athletes only measure themselves one way, on outcomes. So instead of saying, well, you're not hustling hard, you're not this, and now you lost, and now you have to run. Why can't we help athletes measure themselves with their values? They never even know what the damn word means. When I ask athletes, tell me something that you value in yourself, they're like, what is she talking about? Oh, I like, you know what I value when I score 20 points. I'm like, I know. That's not a value, that's a goal. They don't even know what a value is. And for these athletes that we feel like they don't care and they're not working hard and they're not hustling and they have a bad attitude, they don't even know how to measure themselves. Because I guarantee that if we taught those athletes what's one thing you value, the biggest value that I teach when I work with athletes is about courage is a value. It's a value. So how can we get these athletes with low self-esteem that don't try hard to identify one value and bring that value to every drill? Maybe it's risk-taking. Maybe it's trying something hard. Maybe it's doing something courageous. Because if we're going to help their self-esteem grow, they need proof and evidence to feel good about themselves. And it's not with outcomes. It's not with goals.
Obviously, we don't fail all the time in these areas, but I think when you get to talk with somebody like you and you're highlighting some of these areas, it kind of makes you feel like a failure in so many ways. I'm just thinking back to second period today at our athletics, where it was a pretty normal day with some ball handling to start. We did have a newer player. He was a little bit behind, everybody else who's kind of by himself doing a drill, messing up a ton, which we do encourage. And the guys were really celebrating him in an authentic way, not in a make fun way. And so that was a special moment. And then we go and we did a one warm up shooting game before our big green, yellow, red shooting game. We do it every Thursday, and we track, because like you said about culture, it needs to be measured and you need to be able to track it. Well, shooting in some of those other areas or stats, things like that helps us do that too and see where we're at. But one player in particular shot 20 made threes less today than he did a week ago. That's a huge drop in makes from week to week. I think typically you can fluctuate 3 or 4 up, 3 or 4 down, to find your average. 20 is a lot. And I think it was a moment that possibly I missed, or maybe one that I can take just to check and see if there's more going on behind for that type of performance, and not attack him like that. But I don't know. I'm trying to, it's making me think about the things that I do, and are these things helping them to grow and to be fearless or courageous like you're talking about? Or are they terrified when we do that game because they know they're going to have to say their score in front of everybody? And we try to talk a little bit at the beginning of the year of like, listen, like our goal is to see steady improvement, but that's not possible every day. You're going to have some low days. Like, coach, we do talk like that, but you're just making me think and evaluate, which I don't think is a bad thing for coaches, to really evaluate the systems, procedures, games, drills that you do, and try to see if this is really moving our culture, these young men or women, in the direction we want them. I rambled there a bunch. Hopefully you can decipher a path through it.
Something I really think gets missed from us as coaches is we put a lot of our ideas, our thoughts, our feelings onto our players. This is what I want to do. This is how we're going to measure it. I really think that we miss out on asking them for their opinions, because you said, well, maybe I'm putting fear into them. My first thought was, well, why don't you ask them? We don't ask them. You could say on a scale of 1 to 10, how fearful does this drill make you feel? Tell the person beside you. And then let's bring it into a big group. Is there anybody that wants to share their answer with the group? My point being, one of the things that I teach when I work with athletes is I tell them you need to have a voice and you need to have an opinion. And every single one of them says, yeah, my coach doesn't want that. Oh, okay. So think how hard that is for me to try to get them to do it when the coach doesn't want it.
You're kind of handcuffed in a way.
I am. So I'm bringing it up. They do have thoughts. They do have feelings. They do have opinions. They do know what they like and what they don't like. So why don't we ask them? If I go back to that player that had a fluctuation of 20, my guess right off the bat is as soon as things started going badly, think about what they were thinking about. Not missing the next one. Thinking about, oh, damn it, now I'm going to be way... So they're thinking about a negative outcome. And when we don't know how to handle a negative outcome, we end up resisting it. And when we resist, we're trying not to lose. We're trying not to miss. And when we try not to miss, what happens? We miss. You may want to, circle back with that player. I don't know the timing of it, but
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Just ask him, when you started missing, if I had a microphone in your head, what would I have heard? Because there's a cycle that happens that I think is kind of cool, that thoughts create feelings. Feelings drive actions. Actions produce results. Results create another thought, and we go back into the cycle. So think about when we start missing, what's the thought? Oh, geez. Oh, my goodness. Oh, no. What's the feeling? Anxious, nervous, fearful. What's the result? Right? We get into this because it starts with what we're thinking about missed shots. Because what have we been taught? Missed shots are bad. And if you miss too many of them, you are going to get punished. So that might be something to think about when you go back to talk to this athlete, is when it went south, what were you thinking about? Because now we come back to who's the most dangerous opponent, the one who's not afraid to lose. So what is that opponent thinking about in the last 3 minutes of a close game? If we're not afraid to lose, their thoughts are different than the team over here who's playing not to lose. And when that athlete started missing shots, I can guarantee you there was a negative thought cycle that produced negative results. And this is not an opportunity not only to find out what they were thinking, but show them how to shift the thinking. So right away after two misses, you can show them how to shift and stop that negative thought cycle.
How do they shift right there in that moment?
Well, one of the things that I think is super important is, did I take a great shot? And great shots don't always go in. Missing is normal. Again, so I'm coming back to, how do we get our athletes not to be afraid of missing? Missing is normal. And why we're worried about the shot is because we're saying, did it go in or didn't it go in? Instead of, that was a great shot. Man, that felt good. Or that didn't feel good. You know what? I didn't have my feet under me. Oh, man, I didn't go ball in the air, feet in the air. Oh, I was a little bit off balance. So we go into becoming a problem solver.
Yeah.
a solution instead of problem, because when we miss and he had 20 less, I will guarantee you he stayed in the problem. He didn't shift to solution. And solution is always process based. The problem is always outcome based. The problem is I missed. Makes and misses out of our control. The only thing we have control over is the process. And that's where the solution lies. And he would have stayed in the problem. Oh, I missed again. Oh, I missed again. And now you're in those crappy feelings, anxious, worried, nervous. And it's really hard to make shots when you're anxious, worried, and nervous.
Before we go to the speed round, which is short questions where a lot of people probably know you, but after the speed round, we'll really know who you are. But before that, it's with the career that you've had and these, like you said, kind of this deep dive that you've done, really, into your own coaching and philosophy and what's possibly a better way it could have been. What's something you would do differently if you could start over in coaching?
When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I was a hammer because that's what I was good at. And fear works. It does. It works. And I didn't have other tools. I only had a hammer. And I wish I had had a screwdriver. More than one. I needed a Phillips. I needed a Robertson. I needed more than one screwdriver. The second thing that I would have done is I would have given the athletes a voice and an opinion and making an environment where it was safe to disagree with me.
Disagree with you in front of the whole group, disagree with you one-on-one, either way?
I'm not sure exactly, but what I am sure of is that I was very powerful, and power creates fear, and fear creates compliance. And your greatest self can never show up when you're compliant. And we still won a lot of games, even though I think I was pretty average with emotional intelligence and self-awareness. But I would have made it, I would have increased the psychological safety so that athletes didn't have to armor up and impress me. That they could be like, hey, coach, why are we doing that? Or, hey, coach, I don't understand what you just said there. Or, hey, coach, you know what? I don't know if this drill is actually going to help us in the game. Like, who cares if they said it in front of the group or one-on-one? Why would I have to get all defensive about someone disagreeing with me? That's what I think is really important. Be like, well, I only want athletes to bring that up to me, in the privacy of my office. Why? Again, there's a protected, like that's protecting again. What am I protecting? My ego? What, am I worried that I'm not going to show up as the smartest person in the room? That was me. I wanted to be the smartest person in the room. So those would be some things that I would have changed.
We should be secure enough in what we do know, what we do believe, in either our system or style of play or what we're teaching, to where they should all be able to ask questions in front and be secure enough that if you don't know the answer, to say, that's a really good question. Let me spend some time on that. Easier said than done. And I don't know if it has to do with age, because I'm pretty sure there are some young coaches that maybe because of how they were raised, maybe because of how they were coached, they were lucky. They had the few that did allow them to do that. And so they were okay with that. But then those of us that, grew up or played for coaches that were very different, That's a hard habit to break.
I think we get rewarded for this behavior as coaches, right? In our current sport culture. I think all of us would be better served if we could shift from the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. There's 3 ways to lead: from the front, from the side, from behind. I only led from the front. And I wish I had the toolkit to learn which of those 3 was needed at what moment. I needed to be more of the guide on the side.
The Jamodi podcast is powered by Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer for high-quality, innovative scoring tables and LED video display boards that help coaches and schools bring more excitement to fans, create huge fundraising opportunities, and make their jobs easier. Visit sidelineinteractive.com to check out their amazing products. Speed round. Quick questions. First thing that pops in your head. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Oh, Haagen-Dazs peanut butter chocolate.
We've been talking so much about, it's funny you're mentioning ice cream and vegetables. And I'm thinking, okay, I mentioned, at the beginning of this that it's date night and all of a sudden I want something sweet, and that's your fault. You did that. Say your flavor one more time.
Haagen-Dazs peanut butter chocolate. Oh, those.
Let's go.
Oh.
Let's go. The peanut butter chocolate flavor is rare now because I think people are afraid to put like peanut butter in some stuff and different from just the jug. I don't find it very often I'm in Texas, but okay. I don't know.
I've still been able to find it.
Okay. All right. Let's do this 2 ways and greatest women's shooter of all time.
Well, how do you not have Diana Taurasi, right, in that mix? But what I will also tell you, when I listen to myself say that answer, I think what gets missed is our lack of exposure to the FIBA game and what's happening over in Europe. So I would say, if you said in North America, then I would say that. But I'm having been at the Olympics and some of the world championships, there are some shooters that we've never heard of.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I'll flip it to the other side. Greatest men's shooter of all time, which, like you said, we might be missing some, but who do you think?
Again, isn't it such it's such a big question, but you have, how does Steph Curry not be in that conversation?
Yep.
But again, if you backed it up 20 years, what would people say?
Yeah.
If you were over in Europe, I don't know if anybody on this podcast is watching the world championships that are going on right now with men's basketball. There's some names that we wouldn't know that are knocking it down. I think Steph Curry, the way that he brought shooting in the way that he does it, I think has changed the game.
No doubt, off the bounce and with levels of difficulty and speed and range and confidence too. I don't think we'd ever seen somebody shoot it and turn around as the ball's in the air and start running back until him. I couldn't remember that happening. And now you see little kids trying to do it all the time. So he is one of the influencers of the game, like a Pistol Pete and like guys like that. That's good. All right. What was one of your favorite one-liners to tell players? Like if they, came back 5 or 10 years later, they'd say, Coach used to always say this. And remember this too, you can always pass. And I give you the right to pass because that's been a question that quite frankly, I may take out that not everybody's been able to answer.
Say it again.
A favorite one-liner to tell players that, like, if they were to come back 5 or 10 years later, they'd be like, Coach, you used to say this all the time.
I use the phrase big talker Betty Crocker. Just because I always felt there was so much of that. Oh, yeah, big talker Betty Crocker. But, of course, they didn't even know who Betty Crocker was.
They thought you're real cool when you said that, Coach. Okay, best basketball movie of all time.
does a documentary count?
Sure. Yeah.
I thought the Jordan, the documentary.
Last Dance.
What I like about that is you got to go inside and underneath, and you got to see some of the details. I really, really enjoyed. I enjoyed the details.
What did you think of him as a leader?
I really I gained a new respect for his leadership, because I got thinking, if it was me coaching, how would I have handled Rodman? And remember I told you how I was, some things that I regret about coaching. The old me would have just brought out the hammer. And what I respected about how Jordan led is that he created space somehow for
He
Rodman.
let Rodman be Rodman.
Space.
Yeah. Yeah.
He created space there. And I was like, ooh. And I didn't see that coming. That's not what I thought it was going to be. And it gave me more respect than I already had for him as a leader.
And what I love too, I think I had maybe heard about it, but the level that he held himself to, just like people ask, why was he so hard on all those, or why did he always so extreme? That was the level he held himself to, which it allowed him or gave him the right to hold Scott Burrell to that standard, which is, I don't know, maybe there's a part of it that like maybe unrealistic standards if there's only one of him, but I thought that was interesting. Like I knew he worked hard and I knew he was intense and everything, but the way he was practicing, beating everybody in sprints, spending more time, more focus, like, yeah, it was pretty impressive to watch.
Well, there's another saying that I really like, and it says, those who invest the most are the last to surrender. And I just feel like that's what he led those others, and he brought that in because he was just so invested that you never finish last in a sprint when you're invested. Anyway, for all those reasons, that was my favorite one.
Okay, now this one first: texting or talking?
Believe it or not, I'm an introvert, and that's why I like to text, because I get to read it over to make sure. Because if I talk, it's like, oh, darn it, I don't get to pull it back whatever I just said. So I prefer texting, but having said that, you miss texting, always leaves something. You can't connect in the text the way that you can when you talk.
Now, this question comes because I live in Texas, where in high school we do not have a shot clock. But for high school basketball, shot clock or no shot clock?
Okay, I come from the FIBA world where the shot clock is 24 seconds. No shot clock. I may as well just go watch paint dry. Shot clock all day long.
Thanks, Coach. Thanks, Coach. We're trying. There's like three major groups there's the public school, private school, and this other group that they are private schools, but they're on different rules. And they did adopt a shot clock last year. And so we're hoping it moves that way. There's about half the states now that have them. If NFHS, the National Federation of High Schools, if they would make it mandatory, then everybody would do it. And we'd figure out how. But yeah, right now it can be tough at times where, it just allows coaches to control the games too much, where our style is about freedom. And with that freedom, I've learned it, there comes a lot of responsibility of the players, but then also structure and everything that has to happen. But it allows coaches to still just keep the reins so tight at times, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Favorite holiday?
Like two thoughts came in, but then I deferred to Thanksgiving. I just think you cannot beat like that turkey, and it's all crispy on the outside, and then you get mashed potatoes, and then you use all the drippings from the turkey and they go on the mashed potatoes. Oh,
So tonight I'm getting some type of turkey and mashed potatoes and ice cream. That's what you've done. So two more. What book would you give someone?
one of my favorites is Good to Great. Jim Collins, I believe, is the author, and there's a quote in there that I've read that book a long time ago. There's a quote that I've never forgotten, and it says, "Good is the enemy of great." And the book is called Good to Great.
Last one. Name a bucket list item that you still need to do.
I would like to go on a safari in Africa.
That would be awesome. No fear. No fear of those lions. Is just make sure you're up high, in the or the doors and windows are shut, but that would be awesome.
Agreed.
Coach, this was incredible. I do believe I've had the pleasure of, maybe 170 or so recordings at this point. I think it's one of the most impactful and transformational talks I've had. I really forgot quite a bit that I was on a call with you, and I felt like I was just really learning a lot and a lot of light bulb moments for me. And I hope you know that, and I really appreciate your time. And this was incredible.
Isn't it awesome that we can come in and have these deep conversations? I really think that this is leading edge, and I think our coaching culture needs to change. And I think your podcasts are helping coaches do that, because when we know better, we do better, and you're helping all of us know better.
I'm sure when guys listen to this, coaches, I say guys because I'm from the Northeast, and so we don't say y'all. They say it down here. I don't say that. I'm a Yankee, but so you guys, when coaches listen to this, I feel like they're going to have questions. They're going to want to learn more. What's a good place they can go to do that?
Oh, I had a 50-50 chance.
That's so true, though. I used to have some books back here. And every time they'd be like, yeah, this book, and I'd think, oh crap, and I turn the wrong way. Yeah, so and I will. There it is.
Website, right?
And I'll put it in the show notes as well. ShawneeHarle.com. Winning matters, and I will definitely share that. You gave me 2 hours of your time, and I'm just so grateful for it.
Welcome.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi Podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.